ready. And again, I thank you for the opportunity, and it's a great context and group of people to work with, and starting with Katina and Roba. Thank you. I was thinking maybe we should set up, given our planetary ambitions, we should set up some extraterrestrial time reference system. So we'd have 1 hour, one time on Earth, and people would simply learn to adapt to this instead of trying to coordinate. Anyway, I mean, there's an implication here in terms of plurality, complexity, and diversity, and conflict of standards, which actually underlies to some extent many of the challenges to the solutions we're looking into. My focus today, as you see, is on democracy, innovation, environment, and technology. And of course, innovation, I mentioned, is part of all this. We're dealing with existential issues, starting with the climate, and Katina mentioned some of my work, the Quintuple Innovation Helix, borrowing and learning and being inspired by the biological double helix. In fact, a quadruple helix was also discovered in nature recently. There is this idea that we need to bring together with transparency, democratic transparency and accountability, and also proactive engagement, leveraging technology, including social media. My predecessors' comments were great context to build on to some extent. We need to make sure that we bring together government, university, industry, the three top areas of leadership in terms of policies and practices, but then also civil society, bottom up, all of us. That is very important to ensure that we don't just develop visions for the future and become hostages to autocratic contexts. And by the way, that doesn't mean that a democracy being declared a democracy actually remains a democracy. Okay, and 2 days ago there was a major appropriate democratic experiment, the latest in the United States democracy, and the issue is how do we develop further towards transparency, accountability, and empowerment. That is very important, and all of that should take place. This bottom up and top down does take place in the context of the environment, the planet we're living. So this is the quintuple helix. I'll go through some of the slides quickly, but one of the things on the title is also interactions, interdependencies, and implications. The words were chosen to highlight the dynamics, the complexity, the nature, and the anatomy of the dynamics across democracy, environment, and technology. And of course, we need to derive, hopefully, lessons and be enabled to do better going forward for both our theories that are very important. Kurt Lewin, an organizational science researcher decades ago, said there's nothing more practical than a good theory. And then, of course, I say that also as an engineer primarily. And by the way, we have too many non-engineers in policymaking contexts. Nothing against lawyers or economists, but there is a different approach, the bottom-up versus the top-down again, that I think matters and is needed more now than ever. Policy, practice, and politics. The fact is that the policies and the practices do not happen in a vacuum. There's always what the school of thought from Yale in political science talked about, mutual partisan adjustment. There's always ongoing, and we experienced that 2 days ago. So let me move forward. First of all, a reminder as to what innovation is, a Sisyphean uphill battle that often is not truly rewarded. It's the Darwinian struggle as well. Your better solution doesn't always get adopted, and it may well be overcome by the better connected, smarter in that sense, and more agile competitor. So that's something to remember.
Elias, could you go to presentation mode just so we can make sure we read your writing?
Is it too small? Yeah, I was trying to make sure I can
Yeah,
manage
yeah.
the other functionalities. Anyway, let me see. 1 second, please. Thank you.
Sorry to stop your train of thought.
Yeah, so I was just trying to make sure I bring forward for reference and for our context the visions of two people. One is Martin Luther King's, always looking forward to a better tomorrow. And this is, again, all of that is beyond the politics. It's about the substance and the implications. And then, of course, the moonshot vision of President Kennedy, who really galvanized, I think, the US in the 60s, and including initiatives like the Peace Corps and so forth. There are significant opportunities for good and basis for being more optimistic, but we need to be engaged and proactive and not simply compromise to the extent we all can, or not from our own vantage points. So some thoughts about democracy. Of course, 100 years ago, it started the globalization of the modern version of globalization that involves democracy, environment, and technology dimensions and dynamics started, I would say, around that time with the technological developments taking place primarily during the two world wars and following after. And democracy was an important issue, a priority, and an initiative at the time, making the world safe for democracy, but also making democracy safe for the world. We need to be mindful and aware of how these things need to be kept in context and perspective. Now, what can be done, and the things I'll refer to going forward, is actions like the Knowledge for Development initiative that aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and tries to understand how to best use knowledge as a resource and a solution, and in particular in an ecosystem context, to identify and leverage opportunities for what I call happy accidents. I mean, these are things that we've been experiencing, witnessing in places like the Silicon Valley and other places for quite some time. But the question is, how can we diffuse that for broader and sustainable prosperity? So the concepts that we developed is the concept of strategic knowledge, serendipity, first of all, the discovery, unexpected, unsought for discovery of insights, of knowledge that is really important. Social media is a very great enabler of this. And of course, then the other part is the arbitrage, figuring out what that means and what you can make of it. This is the essence of entrepreneurship and innovation at the micro level, but it should be also understood and practiced at the meso and macro levels, frankly. And this is what sustainable, the broad and sustainable prosperity could and should be about. We should be moving from wherever we have natural scarcity to artificial abundance. Sometimes we have the opposite move by design, unfortunately, to develop scarcities for higher profits, among other things. That is not something, obviously, we should become either reticent or compromise with. We should keep always being mindful. Okay, so this is about connecting the different aspects of what innovation is about, and then of course the related activities and phenomena, the socioeconomic, socio-technical, and socio-political dimensions of the solutions we were looking for, and how to first of all define, understand the challenges. In many cases, including what's happening in COP27 right now, there is more business opportunity pursuit and development than really a convergence of minds and souls, as I would say, that we need to have to really tackle the issues. And there's 25% more lobbyists for gas and oil extraction companies this year compared to last year. Of course, this is negative spillover, I would call it, from the war in Europe and other things. But that still should be identified and understood as an opportunity for moving forward. And if not, this should not be happening in my mind. Getting hijacked at that level is really a very truly existential risk. So anyway, let me continue with what we have been looking at, the concept of higher order learning. This is about speed and acceleration effects in innovation and in general in adaptation mechanisms. This is absolutely critical given what we're dealing with, the narrowing and closing time windows. We need to figure out ways to leverage fully technology, including artificial intelligence, to really understand and figure out in real time and on an ongoing basis better solutions and configurations. And that should drive policies, practices, and even the politics. We should get beyond, this gridlock. Having been in Washington for almost 3 decades now, I'm sick of hearing the word gridlock and the excuse for being unable to really bring change. There have been exceptions, there have been narrow windows, but these were really when there was no true bipartisan presence in the government. So that needs to change somehow. And I hope that the new generation of politicians will somehow have a better approach to this. In any case, this is about learning to learn, and learning to learn how to learn. And this is about an ecosystemic, not just systemic, an ecosystemic perspective where we look at different levels, aspects, and modes and nodes that represent an ecosystem, whether it is a natural one, and that's what we're learning and borrowing from, and of course then socioeconomic, socio-technical, and socio-political one, as I mentioned. We need to be aware of these dimensionality and complexity, and to deal with it, we've developed related tools like the Quadruple, and in fact, the derivative complete configuration, the Quintuple Innovation Helix I mentioned before: government, university, industry, civil society, and the environment. So how these dimensions and the stakeholders or components in the ecosystems interact over time, that also reflective of the Darwinian process, perhaps to some extent. There is collaboration and competition for scarce resources and conflicting goals. There is coevolution as that takes place. We all compete and collaborate as appropriate, hopefully, again, figuring out how to do it smarter and faster, and learn faster how to do it smarter. There is also coevolution in the process as a result. And then for a period of time, identification of best suboptimal always configurations, co-specialization as a phenomenon. Now, in my Journal of the Knowledge Economy, one of the journals I work with, I have on the webpage set up, following last year's CUP, what I call the New Earth Initiative. And we'll talk about that next, starting with this discussion here, looking at the what, the how, and the why of this suggestion, if you wish, for figuring out better ways to deal with the challenges. So the Industry 5.0 and Society 5.0 I'll discuss next are about the ideas, the frameworks building out of the earlier digitalization effort, the Industry 4.0, and understanding that there needs to be a technocentric and human-centric balance. And in fact, from that sense, a move in some cases as the technology matures and AI becomes truly embedded and broadly adopted and diffused. I think we should see a move from digital to analog again. In effect, humans are not digital, and digitalization, as we know from an engineering perspective, is a filtering process, a trading off process. We're cutting out the nuances. Putting this in a broader context has significant implications for both democracy and the environment. The trade-offs may not be at all optimal and may be actually dangerously biased. So an analog should always be there. and I have been a proponent of that for some time now, and in essence of a balance, of a harmony between technocentric and human-centric design theories, policies, practices, and politics again. That is increasingly becoming an issue. This is not just high-tech and an issue for small elites. This is becoming diffused in the policymaking, legislation, what have you. For instance, the Real ID program, to the extent that people are truly on board and able to participate. That is fine. It also provides significant opportunities for Big Brother concerns. At the same time, if you're not, for whatever reason, then you're being increasingly excluded. That's in the US. In Europe, we have digital currency transition. In some countries, it has taken place almost fully. Older people or others who do not want to become, digital currency users are being increasingly excluded. So these are big issues. And then the concept that Katina mentioned in her introduction, the emerging unified theory of helix architectures. This is about trying to, do away with the war of the standards, as I would call it. Is it triple, quadruple, or quintuple? I think in the end, this should not be about semantics. There are 5 core dimensions that really matter: government, university, industry, and civil society, the Quintuple Innovation Helix, the top-down and the bottom-up. And at the same time, if we are proponents of democracy, we should be mindful that a triple helix focus, taking care or contextualizing only the top-down government, university, industry, policies, initiatives, practices of the elites, establishes a dynamic for autocratic, outright perhaps autocracies, or even worse in my mind, more dangerous autocratic democracies. So we need to be very mindful of that. And that's why the quintuple helix and leveraging, as I talk about next, design thinking, beyond the box thinking, and in particular agile design thinking toolkits. There is related literature and on the website that you can look into. So the why is because the environment, in my mind, is actually just a symptom of where we, I think, and I'm sorry to say, we sort of not lost, we misplaced the opportunity and the gains from the end of the Cold War in its earlier version. Now we have a new one, and at the same time, and the previous speaker talked about some, how should I say, corporate residents of the LA and other areas in California. They have a big stake and a role to play in this context as to what happens or doesn't. In my mind, it would be much better for all and the planet to have more sustainable and peaceful through growth and prosperity that is broad and shared. That means that we need to understand we have an existential struggle right now between developed democracies and emerging autocracies. And first of all, the struggle of the developed democracies is with themselves, how not to become, and it was said also in the past, you become like your enemy in wars. I mean, let's not be hide behind our fingers. And I don't mean to in any way justify the either the Imperial Japan or the Nazi Germany behaviors and actions, but concentration camps were set up in the US too, in reaction and response, and trying to deal with risk of the potential Japanese Americans. So this is part of our legacy that we should be mindful of. So the point is, how do we ensure that democracy and the environment do not end up being endangered and disappearing species? And there is no, while, as I said, I'm optimistic, that does not mean that I assume that because it's terrible to happen, it will not happen. There are points in time and space, like Europe in the late 30s, where terrible things were on the way, and they were actually just a question of happening and not visualizing them. In fact, I watched the recent documentary about Chamberlain being asked, how about collaborating, partnering with the Soviet Union, pursuing that option at the time. to avert and suppress Nazi aggression. And he said, well, what if that happens and they win? How do we protect Europe from them? So at the time, these were the trade-offs that people were dealing with. I use that as an example in the context. So one catastrophic, Hobbes perspective from economics, the challenge of choices, one being worse than the other. At the time, people tried to avoid the risk of communism, and they ended up empowering Nazism and having to deal with it. So the point is, we need to engage as a species. I'm just going to read briefly the last statement, the red statement here. We need to engage as a species and pursue a coherent, consistent, and continuous local green growth, as I call it, strategy, and increasingly negative carbon footprint policies, practices, and politics via creative, constructive, and concrete public-private people-planet partnerships. It's not enough to just say, can we stick to 1.5 degrees of increase, and we've missed the window and all that. That is happening, that is true. And because it will continue happening, we need to really engage in ways that I'll discuss next. And the policy, practice, and politics operationalization frameworks are the Industry 5.0 plus, as I call it, and the Society 5.0, which I'll discuss if there is time. Bottom line here is that these are building off the Industry 4.0 framework, but they aim to be smartly, intelligently balanced in a technocentric and human-centric sense. And they bring together both the industry and the society components and aspects, and ensure that through design thinking, agile, design thinking and thinking beyond the box approaches, we really empower and unleash, in a way, technology's potential to help us and develop and support what I describe here as cyber-physical innovation entrepreneurship ecosystems for the Earth. And that may have to do with geoengineering and other initiatives I'm happy to further discuss if there's time. All the big players globally with their different initiatives promoting their own national brand, so to speak. And I put in some acronyms here, TP-TIP, Build Back Better, Road and Belt, whether domestic or globally, and they're all connected in the end. Sense. They should figure out ways to compete, as I said earlier, more effectively and efficiently, to bring about transformation, not just digital, but geo-step transformation, geosocial, technological, economic, and political. This is about the New Earth Initiative. Examples, just for food for thought, again, these are on the Journal of the Knowledge Economy webpage. Radically reinventing cost-benefit analysis. We're dealing with all kinds of trade-offs, as I said earlier. I used the example of the late 30s and Hobbes thinking, well, we should make sure we do not become a slowly boiling frog here. And we need to identify and establish broadly accepted, and again, transparent and adaptive metrics, measurements, meaning monitoring and management practices to ensure we redefine, reinvent cost-benefit analysis to reflect our realities, our challenges, and our opportunities. Then adopting and leveraging broadly this knowledge, innovation, entrepreneurship ecosystem thinking and practice, leveraging and pivoting around strategic knowledge, arbitrage, and serendipity effects that can really help us become much more competent in our smart transformation processes. Then smart instant economy policies, practices in politics. In the example and the context of what I was just saying, technology, again, with a big brother concern in the background, allows us to know real time almost, if not everything, almost everything that is happening. Well, that should be really be put to good use. And, we've all been exposed to, central banks, action plans and decisions. They say, oh, it will not happen before certain weeks take place or months even. I mean, this is totally, in my mind, incompatible and decoupled from the realities. In fact, there shouldn't be one central bank policy in this context, and pardon my engineering mindset here. There should be allowed, of course, with human intervention and engineering, pardon my French, involvement, there should be an ongoing real-time dynamic adjustment of rates based on an infinite amount of inputs, rather than some wise economists meeting behind closed doors. Anyway, let me not.
Elias, 2 minutes to go, and then we'll have
Really?
time
Okay, thank
for a
you.
question.
I'll start.
No problem.
I will start talking very fast. Okay, so then I will simply cover the other examples of this, because I think that's really the gist of it. The geoengineering technologies I mentioned, that should be a global, truly global partnership. I mean, you know, some people envision having mansions on Mars or the moon even, but I think we really need to realize and remember that we need to safeguard our planet first, and then that means the US, the EU, China, Russia, and India. There shouldn't be games and struggle between who did what first and who needs to, you know. Countries now are claiming the right to keep polluting because others did it in the past, and of course they should be assisted. There has been tremendous assistance over the decades to them as it is. So the urgency of countries literally disappearing under the water is a real issue that we need to actually galvanize around, but there shouldn't be this micro-minded, as I would call them, if not nano-minded games going on in COP. The geostepping that I mentioned before, and of course, leveraging technologies like crowdsourcing and crowdfunding to really develop the insights, diffuse them, and have the good aspect of social media, enabling instant and you know, total, if you wish, democracy, and engaging everybody. So I will actually, let me just quickly go through these slides. I will not even discuss them given my time limit. This is just to show the quintuple helix context, and then I will just so I saw some reference to people, culture, and technology earlier. Science, cultural innovation, diplomacy as enablers of solutions, including dealing with displaced people, internal and externally, using technology and the Quintuple Helix frameworks, being more safe and secure and less vulnerable per the earlier presentation. This is work and publications we already have on cyber defense, development, democracy, and diplomacy, in fact. Being balanced, techno and human-centric, industry and society 5.0. And I close with this quote from my ancestor, our ancestors, in fact, our ancestor, because whether we're of Hellenic descent or not, that applies in my mind, excuse my arrogance. But philosophers need to be, in some ways, remade kings, and kings need to be much more philosophical. And I think we need to all become much more system-minded and system-centric, ecosystem-centric, if I may. Thank you.